It's Wednesday, and you all know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast. I'm one of your co hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in once again. This week, we're actually recording this on the actual 4th of July, so happy birthday to the good old US of A. And this week, we're going to be taking a look at an article talking about the best movies to watch on the 4th of July. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some stuff we've been watching lately, and we're going to dive in to Jessica Jones Season 1, talking about Episode 1. But first, I got to introduce my co-host, Jacob Martin. Jacob, how are you doing, good sir?
I am doing pretty good, Ryan. Thank you for having me on the podcast once again as your co-host. To everyone that's watching, I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July celebrating Independence Day. We may have our problems and differences, but at the end of the day, the freedoms and the liberties that we have is still really good, and I can't complain at the end of the day. It's been a good week thus far. I finally got to see Elvis in theaters, and that was an amazing experience to see. So it's been a really good week. I'm excited to talk about Jessica Jones and share some good stuff on the podcast with my good buddy. It's been a good week.
Only Tom Hanks can play one of the nicest men ever, Mr. Rogers, and one of the most evil men ever in Colonel Tom Parker. That is range right there. But I guess it's as good a place as any to parlay into what we've been watching lately. So tell me a little more about Elvis, if you don't mind.
Oh man, so I've been a fan of Elvis all my life. I've listened to his music for as long as I can remember, and I've always been interested in seeing like an Elvis movie of some kind. And so when this movie was announced, I was beyond excited. I was more excited when Baz Luhrmann was announced as director because I'm such a fan of Moulin Rouge. So I was excited to see what he was going to bring to the world of Elvis Presley. And I was not disappointed. I thought this movie was fantastic. I know some complained about the runtime, it was 2.5 hours, but I felt like with that runtime, I think the movie did a good enough job of an Elvis biopic as I could have ever asked for, and I think it exceeded expectations in a lot of ways as well. I gotta stress this: that Austin Butler was phenomenal as Elvis. Not once did I see an actor playing Elvis. I saw Elvis on screen. I guess because I wasn't familiar with some of his other roles. I know he had a small part in like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but other than that, I haven't seen him in much. And so I just saw Elvis on screen. I saw the mannerisms. I saw the personality. I saw the songs he brought, the showmanship he brought on stage, and the hip shaking. That's all I saw on screen. I thought I just saw Elvis on the big screen, just much similarly to my experience when I saw Walk the Line for the first time when Walking Phoenix played Johnny Cash. I would put it in that level of excellence in how to play a musical icon. I thought Austin Butler was fantastic. The movie alone is worth watching just to see Austin Butler's performance. The hype on his performance is real. I will say on the flip side, though, I know, Ryan, you brought up you were a fan of Tom Hanks' performance. For me, I was more mixed on the performance. Don't get me wrong, Tom Hanks is my favorite actor of all time, and he has excelled greatly over the years in transforming into real people. Like, look no further than him playing Mr. Rogers. That's one of his best performances ever. I give him credit for actually taking a risk and playing a pretty despicable character. Like, I have to give him credit for doing that. Like, he really went out there and played, such a despicable character. Like, I knew a little bit about the complicated relationship that Elvis and Colonel Tom had. I didn't realize how crazy it got at certain points in the movie, and I was like in absolute shock. I'm like, how did this go on for so long? And it just absolutely devastated me as the movie reached its tragic end. But back to Tom Hanks. I respect what he was willing to bring, but of all the actors in the movie, I felt like everybody succeeded in portraying the real figures on screen. Whereas, I've seen Tom Hanks for so long being the nice guy being one of the most gentlest, nicest people in Hollywood. For me, I mainly saw Tom Hanks in a fat suit being a cartoonish, bumbling character. So I give him credit for going out there in the performance, but at the same time, it kind of distracted me at the same time because I kept seeing Tom Hanks's face. So I was kind of mixed. That's the only like real aspect of the movie I was mixed on. But I do highly enjoy the movie. If you're a big Elvis fan, it's definitely worth checking out and supporting. It's a well done movie. I thought it told Elvis's life story very well. Austin Butler is phenomenal, and because of Baz Luhrmann's creative direction, it's one of the most visually vibrant music biopics you'll ever see. It has that Baz Luhrmann style. Like if you love Moulin Rouge, he goes double on his style in Elvis, and I really enjoyed the movie for that in so many ways.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes is the scene where they go through the new Elvis Presley, where he has to wear the tuxedo and all that, and then they go to the baseball stadium, and Elvis is just like, you know what? I think I'm gonna do my own thing, and he does the number where like he just throws the rule book out the window. That whole thing is just done so incredibly well.
Yeah, and then where he sings Trouble after that, that was probably the most energetic scene of the whole movie. And that was one of the few songs where Austin Butler actually did his own singing. And his singing is actually so in sync with what Elvis did that I couldn't tell the two apart. It was that well done.
Yeah, taking a look at his IMDb really quick, Austin Butler has been like he's been a little bit he's been here and a little bit there. Like he was in this show on ABC Family called Switched at Birth for a season. Like he was in like these other bit parts, but this is the thing that people are going to recognize, that this is where like all roads lead to this. Like he's going to get a ton of work in the future, and everyone is going to recognize that this was his origin point. And
Yeah.
actually, Dune 2 is actually starting shooting this week, and so and he's going to be the nephew. I it's Fade. It's something Fade. I can't think of the name right now, but it's the Sting character in the original Dune. That's who Austin Butler's going to be in Dune 2.
Nice. I'm
And
excited to see him in that.
and I honestly couldn't think of anyone better, especially when he's going to be wearing basically that metal thong looking thing. I imagine certain corners of Twitter are going to go wild, but let's save that for another time. But I'm glad you enjoyed Elvis. It's one of those movies that I was like, I really enjoyed, but the more I thought about it, the better it got, the more it just started turning over and over and over in my head. It very much falls into music biopic stuff, like stuff you've seen in like Bohemian Rhapsody and Walk the Line and other things. But Baz Luhrmann has his fingerprints all over this, and it's so unique that it kind of circumvents itself, if that's even the proper word, and becomes sort of its own thing. Again, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's only one Baz Luhrmann, and it can never be replicated. So whenever he puts out a new movie, and it's as good as movies like Elvis and Moulin Rouge, they're definitely going to stand out. Currently, Elvis is in my top 10 of the year so far. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what else have you been seeing lately?
That's the like only real new release that I've seen, but some of the other movies that I'll share real quick. Speaking of Tom Hanks, I recently rewatched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood for my little Tom Hanks project I'm doing on my channel, and that was a fantastic movie as well. And this is another one where Tom Hanks transformed into a real figure from history. Uh, he plays Mr. Rogers in this movie, and I thought this movie actually did a really good job at kind of subverting expectations a little bit, because you could have easily made a typical biopic on the life of Mr. Rogers, how he created the show, and how he became like a big icon and stuff. But I think the genius of this movie is the fact that the movie plays out like an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. You have the intro with Mr. Rogers singing the theme song, and he's talking to the audience, and he discusses a particular theme on the show. In the movie's case, it's forgiveness, and that's where the main story comes in about the cynical journalist who writes a profile piece on Mr. Rogers, and he's trying to throw some dirt at Mr. Rogers, and then he comes around on Mr. Rogers, becomes a nice guy, and learns to forgive his father, which he never did throughout the course of his life. Some people thought the Lloyd Vogel character was a weird direction to take, but I thought, when you're doing a movie that's trying to pay respect to the show and feel like an extended episode, I thought the message was done incredibly well. I actually was invested in the story. I thought Tom Hanks especially was phenomenal as Mr. Rogers, and how he literally transformed into Mr. Rogers and incorporated the real wisdom of Mr. Rogers throughout the course of the movie. And I especially love the sequences where he does literally, while he's talking to Lloyd Vogel, does address the audience as well, particularly the scene in the restaurant where they do the 1 minute of silence. Like, he's looking at the audience while he's talking to Lloyd during that moment. And while the main character is reflecting upon his stuff, it causes the audience to reflect on our stuff as well. And I thought that was a well done sequence that just encapsulated who Mr. Rogers was to a T. I cannot praise this movie enough. It's a fantastic movie with excellent performances, and it's a really good study of who Mr. Rogers was in this unique way of doing a biopic with the way it told the story.
This is about as good a Mr. Rogers movie will, I guess, with an actor playing Mr. Rogers that we will probably ever get. I want to shout out that the year before this movie came out, there was a movie called Won't You Be My Neighbor, which is the documentary on Fred Rogers, and it was my favorite movie of that year. I remember going to see it at a theater in Ormond Beach, Florida, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. It sadly had to close due to COVID because it was a very old theater and the time was not on its side, let's just say. But I remember going out of my way to see it because at my local theater, they get a lot of Fathom events, a lot of opera stuff, and sometimes smaller movies just miss it over there. But I'll get lucky, I'll go to Daytona, or in that case, I'd have to go to Ormond. So I ended up going to Ormond, and it was just a wonderful experience. And hearing from the mailman who was African American, and the whole controversy with Mr. Rogers and him in the kiddie pool. I hope you know the scene I'm talking about.
I've seen the movie.
That was outstanding, and I thought that documentary was so well done. And I bring it up because the movie with Tom Hanks was very good, but I think that documentary is just even better.
Yeah, and they complement each other very well too. The documentary does a good job of diving into the life of Mr. Rogers, whereas A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I feel like, is more about the legacy of Mr. Rogers. And I think the two work together as a really good companion piece. Like, you can watch them back to back and learn a great deal of who Mr. Rogers was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and shout out to Chris Cooper for playing the dad here. Like, he's a very good character actor. If you need someone to be a salty old man, you call Chris Cooper. That's for sure.
Yeah, he can be a salty old man, and then he can rap about why he hates the Muppets so much at the same time.
Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh.
I got more cash flow than Robert De Niro.
Oh man, he's really underrated. I don't think anyone talks about him nearly enough. But that's a conversation for another time. Jacob, what else you got?
Let's see what else. I'll share two more. I finally watched a movie that's been on my radar for a long time, and that is The Last Picture Show, directed by Peter Bogdanovich, released in 1971. I'd never seen it before. I'm going through his filmography, and I did not like this movie. I struggled to get into it, unfortunately. I hate being in the minority, especially on classic movies that are well acclaimed. This movie was like the director's breakthrough movie. It was like one of the defining films of the new Hollywood era in the 1970s, and several actors did win Academy Awards for this movie, particularly Cloris Leachman and Ben Johnson, who gave some of the best performances in the movie. I do like the black and white cinematography and how it captured the spirit of this Texas ghost town pretty much, and where there's pretty much nothing to do, especially if you're a teenager. That can be pretty rough. I do love the soundtrack. I'm such a fan of country music, and seeing that in the soundtrack was well done. And the performances are really good as well. It was fun seeing a young Jeff Bridges in here who pretty much has a baby face in this movie compared to the roles I'm used to seeing him. So it's fun seeing a young Jeff Bridges, a young Randy Quaid, Cousin Eddie from the Vacation movies, Sybil Shepherd. Like I said, Cloris Leachman's really good. Ben Johnson, I think, is really excellent as like the mentor character. So the technical stuff I like. I just could not get into this story. I did not like any of like the teenage characters in this movie. I thought they were so unlikable. The way the movie was focusing on, some of the affairs that they have with each other just got so annoying and so overlong fast. The 2 hour runtime didn't help. I thought that I was watching like a long, drawn out soap opera almost, and it just got really annoying so fast. There's some sequences that left me a little uncomfortable, especially with what happens to the mentally challenged kid. They trick this mentally challenged kid into losing his virginity for the first time. They trick him into this car, and he ends up making out with this big woman, and that gets out of hand. And are we supposed to root for any of these characters? It was just really hard getting into this movie. It's one where I guess I can get why, if you enjoy the film, if you resonate with like the themes of living in one of these ghost town environments, I don't know, but I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like the story that it told. And even though it's well directed, I struggled to relate to what the director was trying to say. So this is one that I didn't care for at the end of the day, unfortunately.
You're not in the minority with me. I was not a fan of this movie either. I remember covering it for the AFI project, and I just sitting there watching this like, people actually like this. It just it's just so weird. It feels like it's a movie made about nothing. I mean, and granted, it definitely is about something, but I feel like the plot was just kind of slapdashed together just for Peter Bogdanovich to hang out with his friends for 8 to 10 weeks in like a really small town. I don't know. It was a weird flex, that whole movie, but it did give us Jeff Bridges, who is still acting today, and he's still doing good work in The Old Man, which I talked about on the last episode. So the movie did give us that, and Randy Quaid and Cloris Leachman. So it was definitely a launching pad. So I give them that. But yeah, it's just for proof that not all old movies are great. Sometimes there was like what happens now. There's some diamonds, but there's also some duds as well. And I'm not saying that this movie is just bad. Far from it. That I thought it looks very nice. I actually, in my research, and I was looking up a note of it earlier, Bogdanovich actually consulted Orson Welles in regards to how he should go about doing it. And it was Orson Welles who recommended that he shoot it in black and white because it would have been more aesthetically pleasing. And well, I mean, good on Orson for recommending him there, because that was a very smart decision. But anyway, yeah, Last Picture Show, definitely not for me and definitely not for you from what I heard. So
Yeah, I'm trying not to dog on this director because
yeah,
his next two movies, which I had already seen prior to doing this project, I've seen What's Up, Doc and Paper Moon before, and they are fantastic movies, especially Paper Moon if you've never seen it. So I thought like The Last Picture Show would segue into those two movies, but not really. I didn't care for it.
yeah. Well, anyway, what else do you have?
The last thing I want to share before I hand it over to you, My sister and I checked out a 90s action film for the first time. Let's see if you can make three guesses of what it is. It's a very famous 90s action movie.
Are we talking early, mid, or late 90s?
Um, Mid.
Okay. Uh, uh, that would have been around the time of this actor. Is Keanu in it?
He is in it.
Okay, it could be. It's got to be Speed.
Yes, it is Speed. I had never seen Speed before until this past week. My sister and I checked it out. It was on Amazon Prime, and we did like our initial reaction of Speed. We filmed it. That video is dropping, I think, this Thursday. When this podcast eventually drops, so it'll be tomorrow. Man, I love this movie. I don't know why it took me this long to see Speed, but I was on the complete edge of my seat throughout the course of the movie. I miss action movies with a very simple premise. There's a bomb on a bus and it has to stay over 50 miles an hour. If not, it explodes. That's as simple of a premise as you can get. And this director did a great job of embracing the simplicity of the premise with exciting action sequences and an amazing cast that embraces it all. Whether you got Keanu Reeves as the action star, Sandra Bullock as the innocent passenger who's forced to drive the bus, and she's great in this movie. But Dennis Hopper as the villain, he is so good. He is so creepy. He's so conniving, but he's also hilariously over the top at the same time. I love the character so much, and it was fun seeing him try to come up with these crazy schemes, and then he gets his comeuppance at the end, which was very satisfying. I didn't realize Jeff Bridges was in the movie. No, wait, not Jeff Bridges. Jeff Daniels, I corrected myself. Jeff Daniels was in the movie and was really good, along with Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Alan Ruck, I think, is the actor's name. And so that was fun seeing the supporting players along for the ride. The score I thought was really epic. I will say I think it might be a little 20 minutes too long. There's like a tacked on action climax on a subway, but I was still invested in it that I didn't care that it was 20 minutes too long. It was just as exciting as the rest of the movie. The movie actually does feel like three movies in one, which I thought made it even more rewarding. You get the main stuff with the bus, which is the main course of the movie, but you have like an additional action scene where there's hostages on an elevator. The villain puts a bomb on it. So you have that whole mission in like the first 10, 15 minutes. Then you get the bus and then the subway at the end. I'm like, man, then you get like three movies in one with the same characters. That's actually pretty cool. And I'm sure in 1994 you get more than your money's worth when you get a really awesome movie like that. I normally don't like to say the phrase they don't make movies like they used to anymore. I just felt like that was a pretty pretentious way of looking at new movies, but I'm glad this movie was made in 94, to be honest, because I think if you made the movie now, I think you'd overdo it on CGI to where it would look ridiculous and almost video game-ish. And then I think you'd make the story more convoluted and the movie wouldn't be near as fun as the movie we got that came out in 94. So I think this was an awesome movie. People jokingly say this is Die Hard on a bus. And I think of all the movies that were inspired by Die Hard, I'd say this is neck and neck with the original Die Hard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I watched this movie for the first time, I want to say either late last year or early this year. And yeah, this movie is so much fun. And at the ending, I love the part where after Payne meets meets the business end of a subway thingamajigger. Annie asks Jack, "What happened to Payne?" "He lost his head."
That's a
Very,
good James Bond line right there.
very nice, Mr. Reeves. Very nice. But yeah, this all you really need to know about this movie is that bomb on the bus can't go under 50 or else it explodes. And that's all you need to know, and that's exactly what you get. And the thing I love about the villain in that is that he's not like some anarchist who's like, you know what, I'm just gonna blow up a bus today. And it's like, no, Payne was on the force. He was retired unceremoniously, given the kick in the butt and the gold watch and the whole nine. Like the gold watch is actually a pivotal part of his bomb. So that's poetic justice right there. So you don't agree with the actions. I guess the methodology is you can kind of sympathize with them. Like you sympathize with them to a point, and that point being you don't kidnap a whole bus full of people and then set it off to explode. That's something you just don't do. But yeah, this is a gem of the mid 90s and something that is definitely it's aged very well.
Yeah, it is such an awesome movie. I kicked myself in the foot because it took me so long to have seen it, but I'm glad that I've seen it, and it's really awesome. So, what have you watched this week?
So I've been continuing my Bond rewatch. I finished up Thunderball, and like you said, there was so many underwater sequences. And
Yeah.
the thing I'm noticing about the Connery Bond movies is that like I'm surprised that Sean Connery had a working spine because he carried those movies on his back. Because a lot of times the technical side of things just did not age well. There's a lot of sped up stuff where you can clearly tell that it is sped up. So it's like it cuts to like a vehicle and it's like, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, they just like they. Pretty sure they high fived the Flash. They were going so fast. Now, it's the late 60s. They had to do what they had to do in order to get the result that they needed. I understand that. It just, dang, it's so insanely noticeable sometimes, especially in like 2022 with like 4K televisions. You're just in there like, wow, how did that get past the cutting room floor? But
Yeah.
I rewatched You Only Live Twice with that Sean Connery Japanese face. And yes, it is just as awkward as I remember it being. And
Yeah.
it's kind of sad because the plot is actually quite interesting. We get to see the face of Blofeld for the first time because from Dr. No upward, we only heard the voice. We only heard him as number one. And we would slowly get to see like his cat and then a hand and then his legs. And here we actually see Blofeld proper, played by Donald Pleasance, aka Dr. Loomis from Halloween. And and he being Pleasance did a really good job in the role. But wow, the I guess the Asian face, for lack of a better term, they try to bring it into the context of trying to make Bond seem like a local so that Spectre doesn't notice him and try to keep up the ruse that he's still dead. But even still, it's no bueno, man. And I'm not it's and I'm a big proponent of it was the times that they were living in and we are definitely trying to do better and I understand that. But at the same time, it doesn't matter how many layers of context you apply. It's still just you sit there and you're just like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, that was probably the dumbest idea they did in any of the Sean Connery movies. Even in 1960 standards, I don't get the logic behind that at all. Like it adds nothing to the story. Like you think it does, but I think they ditched the makeup after the initial scene. So why was it there? And then when you look at the scene, you could just tell Sean Connery wanted no part of this. When they filmed that fake wedding scene, he just looks so cross, like he wants to punch the camera.
He's like, I'm gonna have a very spirited chat with my agent once this day is over. But
Yeah,
it definitely takes away from the rest of the plot, which, like I said, is honestly kind of interesting, and it's nice to see. It's a nice trivia answer to see where was Blofeld first introduced, like in terms of full form. You only live twice, and so so it definitely the Asian face aside, there is a good movie there, but at the same time, oh wow, it just doesn't age well at all. And before we started recording this, I started on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I have not finished it, but I have started it. And the whole George Lazenby thing is just fascinating because from what I understand, Sean Connery wanted more money and they weren't going to give it to him. And so it was like, all right, I'm just not going to do this anymore. And so they brought Lazenby in. And honestly, from what I remember, because I've only seen like the first 15 minutes of On Her Majesty's, but from what I remember in past viewings of George Lazenby, I really liked him. And clearly the series tries to pay tribute to him sometimes. I mean, the car that we see Bond drive in No Time to Die is actually that car from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So it's not like a thing that they're trying to hide off in the corner somewhere. There's clear homages to On Her Majesty's Secret Service throughout the series. But it's so weird because Lazenby did only the one, and then they brought back Connery, and then Connery left again. So it's just, I don't know. They could have kept Lazenby around, I feel like. But Lazenby has said in interviews that he got to play James Bond once, and he claimed that as his, I got to be it while many others didn't. So, I mean, props to him for taking that level of bragging rights, for lack of a better word. But it's the case of On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just a weird and fascinating trip.
Yeah, it is definitely a weird one. I have read before that Lazenby was originally contracted to do more James Bond movies, but it was actually his agent that talked him out of it. And Lazenby said that was one of the biggest regrets of his life, that his agent told him no after just the one movie. I'm like, he probably would. Who knows what the franchise would have done if we had Lazenby throughout probably the 70s instead of Roger Moore. I think that's an interesting what if right there. Now, as for where I am on Lazenby, I think he's fine. I think because he wasn't as well acted of an actor because he started out as a model and this was like his first big acting role. The acting is definitely not the best. It definitely falls flat in a lot of ways, but where the acting is weak, the stunt work he did is some of the best in any James Bond movies. Like, I especially love the stunt work that he provided, especially during some of the more intense action sequences. Like, you can tell that the guy was physically fit. And even though I would argue that Lazenby was the weakest because of his limited acting skills, he did some amazing stuff action-wise. And so I have to give him credit where credit is due. A part of me wished that this was Connery's swan song. I think if it was his swan song, it'd be one of the best James Bond movies in my opinion. But we got an actor who I've struggled to get into because his acting wasn't that good. I feel like if he played the role more times, I think he would have been better in the role over time. But with an actor who's not really there just yet, and a couple other issues that I personally have issues with, I think the film's a little overrated, but the action sequences are awesome. That's just where I am on the movie.
Yeah, and it's even stranger when you consider that they actually also recast Blofeld in On Her Majesty's Secret
Yeah,
Service, played by Telly Savalas, a legendary actor. He was
yeah.
Kojak. He made bald beautiful. Let's just say that. And the Bond girl was actually Diana Rigg, who had a long career that actually ended with her final movie, Last Night in Soho. Like, she was the main villain in that. She was the landlady in there. If you know, you know. And honestly, On Her Majesty's Secret Service took a lot of risks with the Bond character that were not expected, but I'm glad they did. I'll spoil the ending, but the movie is almost 50 years old. To go out and see it if you haven't. But basically, Bond gets married at the end, and after the wedding, they're driving, and Blofeld, out of revenge, goes to kill Bond, but kills Tracy instead, Tracy Bond. And that's how the movie ends. No triumph. It's Bond holding his dead wife in their car, and you're just like, whoa, that was not something that I expected. And to your point, you were saying that you wish this was Connery's swan song. That makes too much sense Because if like Connery's Bond finally settles down, gets married, and then his wife dies, and it's just like it's heavily implied that when Roger Moore takes over, that the other guy retired. So it's forever confined to the ash bin of what if, but it really is fascinating to think about. And one more note before I move on: this movie has a favorite Bond one-liner of mine. When the opening scene ends and the girl drives off in Bond's car, Bond just looks and he's like, "That never happened to the other fellow."
Yeah.
I thought that was great. But one movie that I forgot to mention last week was I watched Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, and I'll also throw in At World's End as well. If you would like to hear my further thoughts on that, the videos are already on the channel. Please go check those out. I had not seen Dead Man's Chest and At World's End in a very long time, so revisiting them was quite fascinating, but it was it was a great time. I don't think these movies are perfect. In some cases they are too long, but Gore Verbinski, bless him, he started a story, he created a beginning and a middle and an end. And honestly, that's where the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy should have ended. But unfortunately, I got to watch Stranger Tides and Dead Men Tell No Tales to complete the series, which those reviews will be coming very soon. But through a combination of just, you know, of just of Johnny Depp doing his thing, the CGI on Davy Jones, which just looks excellent, the whole battles with the Dutchman, the Kraken at the end of Dead Man's Chest, the final battle at the end over the Maelstrom, I think it's called,
Yeah.
where it's the Pearl versus the Dutchman round two, and Tuck and shoot, Turner and Swan getting married, and then Turner dies, and he has to take over the Dutchman, and they have a son, and Captain Jack stabs Davy Jones in the heart, killing him. There's so much going on in both of these movies, and I think it's honestly, for the most part, done really well. And rewatching these movies through a 2022 lens, I was just sitting there like, I miss movies like this. I really do so much.
Yeah, these are both excellent movies. I think they get a little bit too much hate. I know the criticism people had with these movies when they came out are like, these are too convoluted. They're so hard to follow. And to my point, I'm like, these movies aren't really that hard to follow. You just got to stop playing on your phone and pay attention. I actually thought the movies were pretty straightforward to follow. I think at World's End, they might have had maybe a little too much characters in that movie, but it had a beginning, middle, and end. And I was satisfied with the outcome of this trilogy. You said you're doing 4 and 5 next. They're definitely the weakest in the franchise. I feel like they shouldn't have been made. They were unnecessary. There's entertaining stuff in both of those movies. I mean, Johnny Depp is still Johnny Depp in both of those movies, but the stories were just not near as good, and you can feel the lack of Gore Verbinski in both of those two movies. They feel more like pirate fan fiction movies than real Pirates of the Caribbean movies, if you get what I'm saying. I think at World's End, I would say is the most underrated of the three because I feel like it got the most hate when it came out. But it's actually my second favorite in the series behind Curse of the Black Pearl. I just think that movie did a great job of like bringing such an epic conclusion to the original three movies. And there's actually quite a bit of emotional epicness to the story. Not to mention, it has probably the darkest opening of any Disney movie where you see pirates, including a little boy, get hanged for their involvement in piracy. And it is actually pretty messed up in a lot of ways, but it sets the tone of the movie, it sets the closure of the characters, and it sets the weight, I guess, the pirates and what they're willing to go to take down the big, bad, evil trading company that we follow in the two sequels. I think it's a very excellent, exciting movie. It keeps the swashbuckling action while adding an epic closure and finality of these characters. And shout out to Hans Zimmer as well for doing excellent stuff in all three of the Pirates movies. I especially love Voice of the Colors in the third movie. I thought was very well done. So I have nothing but great things to say about the original three Pirates movies.
Yeah, and in terms of following the sequels, it's really simple. Dead Man's Chest, they're after the heart of Davy Jones, and in At World's End, they're basically after the same thing, for lack of a better word. It's a hunt to stop Davy Jones, and when Davy Jones teams up with East India, the two eventually merge together.
Actually, I would say World's End is more of the quest for Jack's compass because everyone's after the compass in that movie, and it's in so many different hands. It gets quite insane where it ends up.
And the compass doesn't even work. Compass doesn't work, and the rum is always gone. Why is the rum gone? well, I also saw Minions: The Rise of Gru, which I do have a review for. Dude, I recommend you all check that out. But talk about a movie, and this movie is making bank. I don't know if you've been hearing about this, but it actually is now the highest box office for any movie Independence Day weekend ever. Like that's a big deal. And so honestly, I didn't think the movie was that bad. I was kind of going in with low expectations, and the movie got a kick out of me. What can I say? I like the animation. It had a good story. It was just about 90 minutes long, which I think that was a very smart decision. Your mileage is going to vary, especially when it comes to your tolerance of the Minions. But in the grand scheme of things, I actually did enjoy this one a lot more than I thought I would.
More power to you for getting through this movie. I'm avoiding this movie like the plague. I have a bitter hatred for the Minions since 2015. That Minions movie was absolute trash, in my opinion. I don't know if the sequel is going to be any better for me or not. So I know some have said that the sequel's better. I might give it a chance one of these days, but I'm in no rush.
Yeah, the first Minions movie wasn't great because it was just all Minions and their dialogue. But
Banana! Wow, banana!
but there's actually
So obnoxious.
there's actually a solid story with young Gru and the Vicious Six that cuts down on it, and so there's a lot more variety there. But to close things out, we are filming this on the 4th of July. That means my dad and I did our annual rewatch of 1776, and this is a musical. It was released in 1972. It was a film adaptation of the Broadway play that I believe won a couple of Tonys, if my memory serves me right. And this is about the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the fight of John Adams, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence and, well, ratify it and create the United States. I've seen this movie a ton of times, and so like I said, this is my dad and I's 4th of July tradition. We watch it every year. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and we watch it straight through every 4th of July. It's that good. The music is awesome in this. If you go into this, I check out the music first and then go in for the rest. It's so good. William Daniels is excellent as John Adams, who would later go on to be Mr. Feeney in Boy Meets World for all you 90s fans out there. Howard Shaw is great as Ben Franklin. This cast is just unbelievable. And it's really, even though we're living in the United States of America, so you know the ending of this. The Declaration does get signed, the U.S. gets created in the whole nine. But at a certain point, when John Adams loses the entire South on the big vote for independence, that is the darkest timeline. And I'm just in oh no, we're going to get the Civil War early. Even though I know exactly what's going to happen, I still get worked up about it. It's a testament to this movie and how brilliant it is. I was expecting a movie like this, on Letterboxd, to just see the ratings on it and be oh, it's outdated, it's problematic, it's the whole nine. No, it's actually got a lot of positive reviews on it, and very detailed reasons as to why they love it. And I can't can't help but agree with him too. It's especially prevalent like as I've gotten older because there are some very prevalent innuendos that I didn't pick up on when I was a kid. But there's a whole like mini plot line where it involves John Adams calling Thomas Jefferson's wife Martha so that Martha and Thomas could do it, the thing that people do after hours, so that Jefferson can get it out of his system and finally write the Declaration. There's a whole thing where Thomas leads John out of the room and Thomas is like, wait a minute, and John's like, wait a minute, where are we going? There's work to be done. And Thomas is like, yes, I know, but they need to spend some time together. And the door closes, and John Adams is like, wait a minute, you don't mean they're going to? And Thomas is just looking at him like, and John Adams is just looking at him and is like, but it's in the middle of the afternoon. It never, it, there, I just can't explain it. It just makes me laugh. Just the delivery and the implications, just the whole, the whole thing. It just, if you all haven't seen it, seek it out. It usually is on TCM every 4th of July. Streaming wise, I'm not sure. I don't think it's on HBO Max, which is a weird thing for me, but whatever. But seek it out if you haven't. It is way, way good. It is really good.
Yeah, I've seen this film once several years ago, and I gotta be honest, I did not really get into this movie. Not that I have anything wrong with the story or anything. I was just pretty much bored by the whole thing, and I don't remember any of the songs in this movie. That's just me being honest. But your glowing recommendations making me want to rewatch this to see if my initial opinion was wrong. And I'm really, I guess, curious to see where it's going to go on rewatch. I think for me personally, I think the definitive 4th of July founding father musical movie, that give me Hamilton any day of the week. Hamilton's an absolute bop.
Well, that's all that I've been watching lately. Well, what have you all been watching lately? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read them. But Jacob, let's dive into our continued coverage of the Marvel, formerly Netflix shows, but now Disney Plus shows. We finished up Daredevil season 1, and now it is time to tackle Jessica Jones season 1. Now, going into this, I had seen Daredevil season 1 before and had loved it, and you had never seen it before. I had seen precisely one Jessica Jones episode, and it was actually the one that we're going to be covering today. And I'd never gotten back around to it, not for any reason other than I just didn't get back around to it. But it's going to be interesting to see what you think of this one. And this first episode is called AKA Ladies Night. And just to read the synopsis, Jessica Jones is hired to find an NYU student athlete who's vanished, but it turns out to be more than a simple missing persons case. Jacob, what did you think of Jessica Jones season 1, episode 1?
It was really interesting, Ryan. I was not prepared on how dark Jessica Jones was going to go in the opening episode alone. Like, when you first meet Jessica Jones, you know that she's had so much crap thrown against her already. Like, she's gone through PTSD. She has a drinking problem. She shuts herself away from everybody because of trauma in her past. The episode kind of alludes to some of the traumas of her past. It sounds like she's been manipulated by a very abusive man, and I'm really intrigued by where that's going to go. I'm a little nervous about where it's going to go because it'll probably go into some dark territory, but nonetheless, I'm curious where it's going to go at the same time. I forget the actress who plays Jessica Jones off the top of my head, but off the bat, she's really, really good. I'm excited to see where her character is going to grow throughout the course of the first season. I was invested in the premise where she's investigating this missing girl and how it connects with the guy that she thought was dead earlier on, the abusive guy. And it has a pretty dark conclusion. I'm a little confused over Jessica Jones as a character, though, because the episode greatly alludes that she has supernatural powers, yet I'm confused by the execution of these powers. Like, she does stuff in this episode. I'm like, wait a minute, did she just do what I thought she did? Like, she jumps on a stairwell many feet up in the air. I'm like, how did she do that? I thought she was a regular human being. I'm confused over that. I hope the series explains some of these gifts that are being alluded to, but I guess we'll see how that goes in future episodes. Um, there was a shocking conclusion at the end where she does find the missing girl, and you think she reunites with her parents, but no, she gets on the elevator, still manipulated, and kills them in cold blood. And that was a big shock. Looking forward to what happens next. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't think this hit the heights of Daredevil. I think this is going to go in a darker direction. And I think you have to be along for the ride to really get invested in the show. But I am invested in the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next week.
Yeah, and this is coming off of Marvel's website. I looked it up. Jessica boasts superhuman strength and durability. She has the power of flight, though she's never mastered the ability and rarely uses it. She's a highly skilled hand-to-hand combatant and has the temper to match. So, and there's actually a scene early on, or actually middle of the episode, excuse me, where she has to serve this guy that owns the strip clubs serve him the papers, and and she convinces him that she lifted the car off of the ground.
Oh yeah.
When in reality she tells him, oh, it's a jack under the car, when we don't see the jack, and so it is heavily implied that she may actually have indeed lifted the car. But the show does a good job of not giving you the answer and making you wait for it. I thought that was well done. But overall, are you intrigued for the rest of the show?
Yeah, I would say I am. Like, there's some unanswered questions. I'm still confused over the amount of powers Jessica has, but I'm excited to see what's going to become of that. Uh, her overcoming the trauma of her past, I think, will be inspiring by the end of it if it pays off really good. And I'm intrigued by the mystery of this mysterious guy that messed her up. I think there's going to be some really exciting layers, and I'm excited to see unfold.
Yeah, that's actually Kilgrave, and he's played by David Tennant,
Wow.
who is one of the doctors in Doctor Who, and he's been around quite a bit. Other people we see in here is Kristen Ritter, who is Jane in Breaking Bad. She's Jessica Jones. Mike Coulter is Luke Cage, who eventually gets his own Marvel show.
Okay. I thought that guy did look familiar that she was talking to in the bar. I didn't realize that was Luke Cage.
Yeah, that was Luke Cage. That was where we see him for the first time, and he eventually gets his own show later on.
And I wasn't expecting Carrie-Anne Moss to show up either. That was a welcome surprise. I'm like, oh, Trinity's in this show.
Yeah, I almost told you, oh, hey, Carrie-Anne Moss is in here, but I was like, no, wait, I want to see if he catches on that, and you did.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Anyway, let's dive into the main event for the evening. There was an article that I found on timeout.com that said the best 4th of July movies to watch on Independence Day. So I thought it would be a cool idea to go down the article, and if we've seen it, and we discuss it, and if we don't, we can move on. But I thought it would be cool to talk about, seeing as though everyone's in a patriotic mood. So Jacob, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's rock and roll. First up is Yankee Doodle Dandy from 1942. Have you seen this one?
I have.
And I have too. I actually covered this for the AFI project. This was directed by Michael Curtis with a Z. And I remember liking this one. I haven't watched it since I watched it to review it, but I remember liking it quite a bit. This was based on a true story, if my memory serves.
Yeah, it is. It's based on the life of a songwriter named George Cohan, who was best known for writing patriotic songs such as Over There and You're a Grand Old Flag during World War I. and his songs were so popular during that time, and he was still around during World War II, that a lot of these songs were used during World War II as well to boost American morale during such a dark time. And I thought, what's his name? James Cagney plays him in this movie and is absolutely fantastic. What's really fascinating is around this time, he was best known for playing gangster roles. And so him doing a musical role seemed out of left field, but Cagney had always been a song and dance guy. And this was always like something he wanted to do. And so when he got the chance to do it, he excelled at it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he won an Oscar for this movie, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. But the movie was fantastic. It's one of my favorite musicals of that era, a lot of which is due to James Cagney's performance, and the musical numbers are very electrifying to see. They're very rousing, very flag waving, a little bit old fashioned in a lot of ways, but old fashioned in all the best ways. And even in 2022, I still get a great kick out of this movie because of how well done it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, next up, and I don't think I even really need to ask, but next up is Independence Day. We both have definitely seen this. This is the role that launched Will Smith, and he had been in a couple of movies before, but this is the one that announced him to the world. And Jeff Goldblum's also in this, and Bill Pullman is one of the best movie presidents of all time with that speech. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. God, it's so, so good. And honestly, the CGI and the practical effects they still actually hold up. I from what I last saw of it, some terrifying stuff in here too. There's the scene where Brent Spiner, I believe that's the name of the actor who plays Dr. Oaken, is being controlled by the alien, and he's like got wrapped around the throat by a tentacle, and the alien is like, peace, no peace. And like, sheesh, that is scary. And then he hacks into the president's mind, and is like, his general is like, is that glass bulletproof? And the Secret Service agent is like, no, sir. And he grabs his gun and he's like, bang, 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 bang. It's like, wow, brutal, brutal, brutal stuff. In my opinion, one of the better alien invasion movies of all time. It's dumb popcorn fun, but that's all it needed to be. And that's exactly what it was. And it provided one of my favorite Will Smith moments where he's dragging the dead alien across the Bonneville salt flats, and he's like, dragging your dead ass across the Dan desert. And what the hell is that smell? And he runs and he kicks the thing. I could have been in a barbecue. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Too much Will Smith excitement.
Anyway, I'm going to edit that part out, but it has one of my favorite Will Smith moments where he's dragging the dead alien across the Bonneville salt flats, and he's ranting and raving about how he smells, and he's like, and what the hell is that smell? And he runs and he kicks the alien. He's like, I could have been in a barbecue, but no. And he's like dragging the thing. It's so funny. I love that scene.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. I definitely agree. A very good alien invasion movie. The effects, for the most part, still hold up. And it was a movie that draws you in on the thing that aliens were successful enough to blow up the White House. And that image still stays with you even to this very day. So, very, very good movie for the 4th of July, along with that amazing speech.
Yeah, indeed. Well, next up, and again, I don't think I really need... I think we can touch on this one briefly. It's Jaws. I mean, do we even really need to say anything? It's an interesting inclusion, but then again, it is leading up to the 4th of July. So, I mean, there is that.
Yep, and there's that famous line, if you say shark, we're going to have a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
So I don't think we really even need to say anything. It's Jaws. It's one of the finest movies ever made. Let's move on. Next Next one is Sergeant York. Jacob, have you seen this one?
I have seen Sergeant.
Really?
I have.
Yeah,
Really, really awesome. Have you seen it?
I have, and I love it. It stars Gary Cooper, and this is a role that I really didn't know much about Sergeant York going in, but it's one of those where it just you want to dive into more of his psyche. It kind of reminds me of Hacksaw Ridge, if you think about it,
Yes.
because it's along that same lines of a very religious man who grapples with what to do in the middle of war, but at the same time, it's like it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, I can definitely see the comparison. And both movies are excellent in their own ways. It's been quite a few years since I've seen Sergeant York, but from what I remember being captivated in this story. And I thought it was a really awesome story seeing a guy who started out as a pacifist who would refuse to fight to someone who in that moment ends up being compelled to fight when he sees what's going on in the war around him and the harm being caused against the people that were his comrades. And I thought it was a very compelling story. Gary Cooper is phenomenal in the movie. I think of the two movies with a similar true story, I think Hacksaw Ridge is the more emotional one. But for its time, Sergeant York I thought was a very good story.
Yeah, I agree. Well, next up is All the President's Men. Have you seen this one?
Shockingly, no.
Well, I have. I actually covered this for the AFI project, and I kind of get why this movie is a big deal. I mean, it covers Watergate. It's a pretty big scandal in American history. I don't think I need to go into great detail. If you just by hearing Watergate, I'm sure you all know exactly what goes on there. But the the acting really is the reason why this movie is so great. Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And I love how matter of fact this all feels. It's not like a we're gonna fight the system and we're gonna bring these people to power. We're gonna bring them to heel or something like that. It literally is just like, hey, Woodward, I'm Bernstein. We're going to be working together on this thing. And they're like, okay. And that's literally how it starts. It's like a thread where it's like they start pulling on it. And the more and more they pull on it, the more like things get brought up. And then Deep Throat gets entered into the equation. It's a very riveting movie. But in terms of like exciting things happening, it's not really like that. It's mostly, it I don't want to say it's mostly just dudes writing and following leads, but it's probably the movie that celebrates journalism the best, if that makes any sense. It's not sexy. It normally doesn't make for great movies. It just is just people just is like, all right, I have someone who may know something about this particular thing, and then just following that. And celebrating the mundane, I think that's why it succeeds.
Yeah, it's definitely one I definitely need to check out. I've heard nothing but great things about it.
All right, well, next up is Lincoln. This is the Spielberg movie, and I was actually watching this earlier, or clips of it earlier. And I forgot how loaded this cast was. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis, Sally Field, Tommy Lee Jones, David Strathairn. I saw James Spader in there somewhere, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I'm blanking on some, Tim Blake Nelson, like a young Dane DeHaan before he would go on to do other things. Like this cast is just loaded, and I mean Daniel Day-Lewis just brings home the bacon on the whole thing. Like he's just a chameleon. I don't think I've ever heard Daniel Day-Lewis's true voice, as silly as that
Yeah.
sounds. And the scene where he just is like he's trying to get the 13th Amendment across the finish line, and everyone's just like, "We can't. We got to deal with the Confederacy. The Confederacy won't buy this." And he just snaps at his cabinet and he's just like, I have made a promise that we're going to get this across the finish line and you people are idiots. Well, maybe that last part's a bit exaggerated, but the point is still sound. Is this one of Spielberg's best? I'm not sure, but it's a hell of a get to get Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, that is an automatic A+.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Lincoln is a fantastic movie. Definitely not rewatchable. Very slow moving, very theatrical in a lot of ways. Feels like you're watching a stage play at times, but more than worth watching for the acting alone. Like Daniel Day Lewis is phenomenal. as Abraham Lincoln. Like, you don't see Daniel Day-Lewis, and like a lot of these best biopic movies, you don't see the actor, you see the person. And Daniel Day-Lewis is like what I said of Austin Butler as Elvis times 20. He's great in this movie. And like I said, the acting's good, the story's engaging. I thought a very well done American story, very well done. Spielberg's one of the greats.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, next up is The Sandlot. I don't think I need to
Yeah,
ask you if you've seen it, because I
seen
mean,
it.
I think every living red-blooded American has seen The Sandlot at the very least once. It's one of those movies that you just watch. It's like it's inherent to that. It's curious because from what I understand, critically, it wasn't received all that well in the beginning. Just over time, it just word of mouth and word of mouth just spread. And it's just a classic movie. And it honestly has one of the best 4th of July scenes or celebration scenes I think you could ever ask for, with Ray Charles's America the Beautiful playing, and the boys having their night game, and Porter getting the hot dog with the onions and the mustard and rushing to get the food before the game, and Smalls running out there, and then Benny the Jet hitting the home run, and they're all like looking, and the music swells and you see the fireworks. Wow, you can't ask for a better like combination of things, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, this is actually one of those movies I've only seen once in my life. It's not one I've gone back to. It's not one I have the deepest nostalgia for. But from what I remember, it was a really, really good movie with relatable characters. It was funny from start to finish, and I didn't expect James Earl Jones to show up in the end, so that added extra icing on the cake right there.
Yeah, seeing him was just really weird, but it was a pleasant surprise. I remember seeing him, and I'm like, hey, that's Darth Vader. That's nice to
Well,
see. Well, next up is The Best Years of Our Lives. I think we both have seen this one, right?
no, I've not seen that one.
Oh, wow. Well, you definitely should, because it is really, really, really good. It's directed by William Wyler, who directed Ben-Hur. He actually won an Oscar for this, if memory serves. And
And
it's,
didn't the movie win Best Picture too?
if my memory serves me right, yes. And this is definitely not an easy watch. I think it's one of the earliest examples of soldiers dealing with PTSD in a movie. So, and I think it's handled well for the most part. And I think that all the actors do a fantastic job. And there's some very distressing scenes at parts, but for 1946, I think they did the PTSD stuff very well. Jacob, please see it sometime, and I want to hear
Yeah,
what.
yeah, you're intriguing me. It sounds really good.
Well, next up is Team America World Police. I've actually never seen this one.
I haven't seen it either.
The only thing I know about it is that there's a scene where there's this puppet and he gets shot through a bakery window, and that's about it. But
Yeah, the only thing I know about the movie is apparently the catchphrase is "America, if yeah."
yeah, and that song that follows it, "Coming again to save the mother effing day." Yeah, I know about that, but that's all I know.
Uh,
Well, this next one, and I'm pretty sure, considering considering your John Ford series, I think you know about this one, Young Mr. Lincoln.
I have seen Young Mr. Lincoln, and yeah, I am planning on diving into John Ford at some point. I have a privatized list of it on Letterboxd just to be prepared. But I have seen Young Mr. Lincoln. It stars Henry Fonda as Abraham Lincoln in the younger days of his life. Have you seen the movie before, Ryan, before I add on?
I actually no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So the movie focuses on the early days of Lincoln when he was getting into law. And the movie pretty much is like his first big court case. And I think the story itself is fictionalized. I don't know if it was the actual case we see in real events, but the movie, it's a murder trial. And Abraham Lincoln, he's unprepared, he's inexperienced, but he's willing to take the job to show that he has the integrity to do a job like this. And, he's played by Henry Fonda, and Henry Fonda is an amazing actor who's done so many incredible roles, whether The Grapes of Wrath or 12 Angry Men, so many other stuff. He nails the part of Abe Lincoln. The story is very engaging. I'm such a sucker for courtroom dramas, and it's just as engaging in this movie. There's really good cinematography for a movie this old, 1939. Again, it's been a few years since I've seen the movie, but it's really, really excellent. This and the Spielberg Lincoln can be good companion pieces. You can watch them back to back and get something meaningful out of both of these movies. And uh, young Mr. Lincoln being the beginning stages of his life, and obviously Lincoln being the very end. So, pretty good little uh, compare and contrast type movies.
Well, very cool. I'll have to search it out. Well, next up is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Have you seen?
Oh yeah, I have definitely seen this movie and I love it.
Yeah, I covered this one for the AFI project, and Frank Capra is just a silent killer lately when it comes to directing, because he directed so many classics, and it's like, I think there's some people, when you mention Frank Capra, they're like, who? So I mean, that could be just me, but Frank Capra is just a fantastic director.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Think of the ones I've seen, my second favorite Frank Capra film behind It's a Wonderful Life. It's a fantastic story that was ahead of its time. I know when the movie came out, a lot of people didn't really think of the idea of people in government being corrupt and all that. That was like unheard of in the 1930s. I know the mentality was like, oh, our leaders are in charge. We got to trust them all the time to make the right decisions for us. And then, over time, with stuff like Watergate and other scandals, people are like, maybe not. Maybe we should be trying to put them in check a little bit in some ways. I'm not trying to make a political rambling here, but I'm just kind of like getting to the point. The movie does a great job of showing, I guess, American idealism in all the best ways. I love the character of Mr. Smith, played brilliantly by James Stewart, and his willingness to go beyond the corruption of the system. He has his morals, he has his ideals. He doesn't care about the red tape and the politicking and the dirty deals and stuff like that. He's like, no, I gotta get this done. When I say something, I mean it. And you want to instantly root for this guy. You don't care what side of the political spectrum he's on. You just want to see this guy do what he wants to do. And he absolutely is an amazing character. I just love the story unfold. The filibuster speech at the end is so good at the end. Also, shout out to Claude Rains as Smith's what he believes is his mentor, but pretty much becomes his big rival near the end. Very, very good movie. Powerful finish. Definitely a great movie to check out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, Claude Rains is a character actor who you don't realize was in just so many things.
Yeah.
So when you see his face, you're like, yeah, I had no idea he was in this. Like, so that's really cool, and makes me want to watch that movie again. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Well, next up,
So
and
good.
this might be a bit of a curious one because I've always categorized this with the month of Christmas. I actually haven't seen it. It's Meet Me in St. Louis.
I saw it once, but it's been a long time. I think it celebrates both holidays in there, but I think most people associate it with Christmas because that's where Judy Garland sings "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." She's the one who originally sung the song, and that's the scene people know it for. There is a Fourth of July scene in the movie, but it's been so long I forgot the context of it. When I saw it, the movie was okay. Judy Garland's good in it, but the movie was nothing real memorable in my eyes, but I do need to give it a rewatch. There are two really good songs in this movie. The already mentioned Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, and that's also the movie where Judy Garland sings. You might know the song Bang, Bang, Bang with the trolley. Do you know that song? Yeah.
Yes, I know that one. Yeah, and I'm actually considering reviewing that for my Christmas series later on this year. So you
Cool.
all should stay tuned for that. Well, next up, and At first, when I was reading this list, it seems like a bit of a curious choice, but the more I think about it, it actually kind of does make sense. It's Apollo 13 from director Ron Howard.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah, good choice for 4th of July, though. I mean, if you were celebrating America, then it's probably one of the more American things to do to help one another or to help these three astronauts get back down to Earth. I mean, the movie is fantastic. Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, the late Bill Paxton, may he rest in peace, Gary Sinise on the ground in one of Gary Sinise's best roles ever. And I love the ending where they finally get him down to earth, and Gary Sinise is like, Odyssey, this is Cape. Do you read? And it's just like this long period of silence, and Sinise is just going on and on and on, and then finally Jim Lovell goes, Cape, this is Odyssey. Nice to see you. And the whole just room goes, yeah, we got him. We brought him back. It's so good.
Yeah, it's an awesome movie. I think it goes on a little too long at times. You can feel the runtime, especially when they're stuck in space. They're making the slow transition back to Earth. But I do agree with what you said. Very good movie, great cast, very suspenseful in places. All around the great movie.
Yeah, well, next up, and this is a movie I've actually never seen. It's Born on the 4th of July from director Oliver Stone.
I haven't actually seen it either, but I've been meaning to see it though.
Yeah, it's Tom Cruise, and I know the story, but I just, like I said, I've never seen it. But I mean,
yeah, I think it's somebody who fought in Vietnam, got injured pretty bad, and he gets pretty upset after that, and I think he becomes a hippie afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's the plot, if my memory serves. Well, next up, and this is the movie we both have unquestionably seen. It's Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yep.
Yeah, from director Joe Johnston. That's someone who knows how to make a period piece.
Between that and The Rocketeer.
Yeah, and I love just. There's a part of me that really wants to go back to like the 40s and 50s with the MCU just to see what they would do, but I don't think that they will go back, which, I mean, it is what it is, but I would hope that they go back one day.
Yeah, it's a really awesome time in the MCU. An era the only time we've seen it in the MCU is this movie. And I think it's an underrated movie. It's one that's grown on me the more this movie's aged, especially now we got Captain America's full character arc in the MCU from First Avenger to Endgame. I think that improves this movie all the more because this was an okay movie when I first watched it. But over time, I think it's become one of the best origin stories in the MCU up there with the original Iron Man. We all know Chris Evans is good. I do love the direction. Very over the top, but I love that it's trying to pay homage to a lot of 40s like B movies and stuff like that. And I thought it was done very well. I love Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull. Haley Atwell as Agent Carter is really good. Tommy Lee Jones is good in his supporting role. I love the song Star Spangled Man with a Plan. That's one of the great earworm songs in the entire MCU. I have nothing but great things about this movie. I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, next up, and this is another one we both have definitely seen, the OG Rocky, 1977.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Love
big
it.
old thumbs up from the both of us. And honestly, this is a movie that, kind of like the character themselves, shouldn't have worked, and by all accounts could not have worked, but it somehow did. It got Stallone an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. It won Best Picture that year. And quite honestly, you can't walk to any other American without like and say Rocky, and then people either think, "Oh yeah, Balboa." So like, if Stallone for nothing else has that legacy, and that can never be taken away from him.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody could have played the character as well as Stallone. This was his passion project. Studios wanted other actors, but Stallone's like, no, I got to do it. It's my movie. And thank God he made the right call because I can't picture any other actor playing such an iconic character.
Yeah, absolutely. And the movies are still going with the Creed series, Creed 1 and 2, which are both good, and
Yeah.
Creed 3, which I sincerely hope they come up with someone original for Adonis Johnson to fight, and not like Mr. T's son or Clubber Lang's son or someone like that. Because Creed 2, it was very nice to bring the Drago arc to a close. I thought that was handled very well, but if they do continue with this, I hope they come up with something original. That's all that I ask.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, next up, and we're coming up on the last two, so this penultimate choice is National Treasure. And I mean, it seems like a bit of a weird choice,
Yes.
considering that Nick Cage steals the Declaration of Independence, the very thing that was signed on the 4th of July. But it also does make sense why this would be.
Yeah, it's one of the most American action adventure movies out there because we're dealing with American history, conspiracies involving the founding fathers, and the Declaration of Independence is involved. It's actually a really neat story to watch, I think, during the 4th of July. I think that's a really brilliant choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like Book of Secrets, too. I think that one's good as well.
Yeah, both are awesome.
Well, to close things out, let's get off Harrison Ford's plane, Air Force One.
Love it.
Yeah, another one of the best movie presidents ever. When he pushes, he shoves you and shoves you and shoves you out the airlock. But this is
awesome in that role.
Is such a good action movie. Harrison Ford is the good guy. Gary Oldman is the bad guy. My God, he is menacing in this. And Harrison Ford's Secret Service agent who turns on him with the great line, "So will the next president." And you're like, you're gonna do this again? Like, okay, you need to hit the bricks, Junior. You're out of here. Like, it's so well done.
And yeah, and this is one of those action movies. I didn't watch it until last year, 2021. I've watched the film. It was on Netflix at the time. And my whole family, we all highly enjoyed this movie. Maybe not the best action movie in the world, but it was just so fun. Harrison Ford, Gary Oldman, Glenn Close was really good in the movie too. Very exciting, very engaging, leading to that awesome standoff at the end with the "Get off my plane." I love this movie.
Yeah, it's just it really this, and they've tried to do similar things like Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down. They can't capture the same energy that Air Force One did. Well, I ask all of you, what do you all like to watch on the 4th of July? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. And that's another episode in the books. Jacob, thank you so much as always. It is a privilege. Where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can also subscribe to my 2 YouTube channels. My second channel, Storytime with Jacob, is where I do the book reviews and read-alongs. On that channel, I just recently finished Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which was a fantastic reread. I just started the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia series for my channel, Prince Caspian. That's another one I haven't read in so long. I'm excited to reread that one once again. Pretty good so far. And then on my main channel is where I do all the movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, and all that fun stuff. Some videos that have just recently dropped on my channel this week. I have a new episode review of Downton Abbey where I reviewed episode 3. That's the one with the Turkish guy. That went into some dark places that I didn't expect, but you'll watch that video to find out my thoughts on that. I've also reviewed The Last Picture Show, which I've already talked about. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I've reviewed Stanley Kubrick's first movie, Fear and Desire, an interesting experience in itself. I got other videos coming on the channel real soon, including my Superhero Saturdays video on Thor Ragnarok and my Celebrating Disney video for Stitch the Movie, one of the direct-to-video films, along with my review, first reaction of Speed. So really awesome stuff coming this week.
So you're reviewing Stanley Kubrick's debut. Does that mean that Kubrick series is coming?
It is.
Ooh, I want to be there for 2001.
So
I want to. If you've never seen it, I want to walk.
I've seen it several times. It's not. I have a love-hate relationship with 2001. I know you're a big fan of it. I've been meaning to talk to you about that, and I think you'd be the good choice to be on that one since I know
Well,
you're a fan of it.
well, I call dibs. Each
All right,
dibs on that.
it works for me, man.
All right, very good. And we've also well, like I said, thank you so much, Jacob. And in terms of this channel, if you would like to follow me on social media, it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. And this week on the channel, coming up this Friday, I will be covering Thor: Love and Thunder when that drops. And then, of course, on Sunday, I will be dropping a review for Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. It's going to be interesting to revisit, to say the least. But that is all for us. We hope that you all have a very safe and healthy holiday, or hope you had a safe and healthy holiday when you are watching this. And we hope that you all are doing very well. It's Jacob Martin. My name is Ryan Cam, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.